Kentucky Bourbon Festival, the virtual edition. I'm in the kitchen of Bardstown Bourbon Company, which is the name of the restaurant, isn't it? Kitchen and bar, right?
Yes, sir.
With Chef Stu Plush here, the executive chef at Bardstown Bourbon Company Kitchen. It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
We're in this kitchen. We're going to tear up some food today. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to learn a little bit about cooking with bourbon, which is, implied when you're doing a bourbon festival show, of course, right? We were talking beforehand about the difficulty in cooking with bourbon. And people they think, oh, sure, it's great, pour it in, let it rip, let's move, more is better. Isn't always the case, is it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, maybe when I'm pouring a cocktail at home or something, maybe a little bit more is better.
A little more is better there?
But yeah, I mean, it's tricky. Yeah, we were talking before, and you got to watch that heat and the alcohol in the bourbon. They can really overpower some flavors.
Mm-hmm.
You got to watch sometimes also when you cook it down too much. Some bourbons get a little bit of a bitter note to it as well.
Sure, that oak will come shining through at the wrong time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll talk about some of the dishes you're going to do for us today.
All right, first thing we're going to do today is probably one of our best-selling dishes here at the Kitchen and Bar is a maple and bourbon glazed Brussels sprouts.
Nice.
So to start the dish off, we start with our Brussels sprouts. Halve them, get them in quarters, make them a little bit easier to cook, a little bit easier to handle. You want to toss those with a little bit of olive oil and some salt and pepper. And I like to throw them in my oven at 400 degrees. It takes about 25-30 minutes depending on the Brussels sprout.
They're pretty tender at that point, right?
Absolutely, because all we're going to do is we're going to finish them in a really hot pan with a little bit of bacon grease and some shallots.
Kentucky ingredients for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and glaze it down with some maple and some bourbon.
Excellent. Show us how that works.
All right.
Let it rip, Chef.
So first thing I'm going to do is get my saute pan start getting it nice and hot, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of bacon. We use Broadbent Farms Applewood smoked bacon.
Absolutely.
It's a Kentucky product.
Catawba, Kentucky?
Absolutely. It has got a great smoky flavor to it. That's why we like to use it here at the kitchen. So we're going to get that going and just kind of let it render out some of its fat, start to crisp up for us a little bit. That's something I like to do while I have the Brussels sprouts in the oven going, staying hot.
So while that's working, talk a little bit about, maybe historically has bourbon been used often in Kentucky cuisine, or is it kind of a new thing, or do you know? I mean, you're a young chef, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it's not that you've been around it all this long to have been steeped in it.
Yeah, it seems like it's really just kind of taken off with the bourbon boom itself. Growing up, I don't remember a lot of people cooking with bourbon as much.
I don't either. I never did when I was in kitchens.
And then when the bourbon boom took off, has it been 10, 15 years ago, maybe more now? Time kind of flies. It seems like it's popping up a little bit more.
So what's the advantage of having a restaurant in a bourbon distillery? You'll never run out of whiskey for one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm never going to run out of whiskey. And, here we have quality ingredients to work with. And we're always trying new things, being very innovative and moving forward, forward thinking in the distillery. So we get to deal with a lot of the different collaborations and stuff that we do with some of the other liquor spirits companies and things like that. So sometimes say, hey, we have this new product here, try this, or hey, we're doing this pairing with that.
So this is the Fusion series.
Yes.
What do you like about this in particular for cooking?
To me, it's very drinkable, and it's not a super high proof. Our Discovery series is a little bit higher proof than
that's right, 98.9. Yeah.
And our Discovery comes in hotter than that. So as far as one of our flagship bourbons, I like it. It's got a nice little bit of a sweet note to it. It's delicious.
If people are coming to you and asking you, how should I kind of cook with bourbon, but what would I do to add it correctly? I mean, what dishes do you like best? Is it a heavier protein? Is it a sweeter dessert? Seafood always seems a little weird for me to use with bourbon.
Yeah, because there was a tendency to overpower seafood a little bit. I probably use bourbon most in my desserts. I love pairing it with like apples and pears, and it just, to me, it works really well with sweet notes, caramel, if you eat it with a caramel or something like that, it brings out the caramel notes and flavors and stuff in the bourbon. But typically with heavier proteins, sauces for steaks. I like using it with venison, things like that. Some flavors that it can stand up to.
Do you ever recommend that people sip whiskey neat with their food? I mean, that's something I love to do.
You know, me personally, it's something that I don't normally do, believe it or not. I don't sip on a lot of whiskey when I'm with my meal, unless it's dessert. So, but yeah, I mean, drink whiskey when you like it. You know, drink bourbon when you like it. If you like it with your steak, sip on with your steak. If you like it with your fish, sip it with your fish. You know, I'm not one to tell you when to drink your bourbon, but
just drink it.
Because I really personally like really big bourbons, barrel proofs and things like that. So they have a tendency to really kind of hit my palate kind of hard. So if I'm sipping on one of those neat with my meals, sometimes it kind of affects.
And those can be a bit much in food, right? With the super higher proofs, because you have a lot of alcohol that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So do you caution people maybe to try something with a lower proof, even lower cost, since you're cooking it and you're going to manipulate it anyway?
You know, I think cooking with bourbon is kind of like cooking with wine. I'm not going to cook with anything that I'm not going to drink.
Right.
Because sometimes, you get some of those lower cost bourbons and things like that. It can get a little tricky, get a bitter note or things like that.
Sure.
And sometimes they have some off flavors. But, I prefer to, cook with what I'm going to drink.
So while this is cooking and that shallot's caramelizing, tell us about this gargantuan wedge of cheese we have here.
All right.
It may not even be for this recipe, but I'm curious.
It is. So this is Kenny's Farmhouse cheese. This is their Blue Gouda.
That's a Kentucky product?
It is absolutely a Kentucky product. We use several of their cheeses here at the Bourbon Kitchen. And actually, this is for this dish. It's got a nice little blue note to it, but it's not crazy overpowering. It's not like a Stilton or anything like that. But it's got some nice earthy flavors to it and tones. It's a little bit of a kind of like a semi-hard cheese.
Uh-huh. So it's pretty young, I would assume, in terms of a blue.
It is. It is definitely very young. Again, sometimes the blue scares people away, and this is in my opinion, is a good cheese to introduce people to, especially if they're scared of the blue cheese.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them think the smell is off-putting and things like that, but this one doesn't really have that strong of a smell to it.
To no one's surprise, the dominant note that we're smelling here is the distillery working. But 60 yards away, it smells wonderful mash smell that I'm getting the whole time.
I smell it.
Bardstown cologne.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I smell it all day. That's one of the.
Gosh, it smells good.
It's interesting. It's one of the first things I smell when I start pulling up on the property in the morning. It's the first thing I smell.
Time to punch in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how will you prepare this for that dish?
So what we do is we just kind of cube it up and maybe just about like a medium to a large dice. Because what we'll do is once I get the Brussels in there, caramelizing with the maple bourbon reduction, just kind of throw that in the last minute, toss it around, let it start getting a little melty, and kind of throw it all together.
Awesome. Too bad the cameras can't see this wonderful blue flame. It's like Satan's breath. It's a handy thing to have, a 30,000 BTU burner.
It is. It's nice. It definitely is nice. But yeah, this has been one of our top dishes, since I've been here. I mean, and again,
Kitchen opened 2 years ago, maybe?
We did, yeah, about 2 years ago. And we've changed it a couple of times. This version, we're using a little bit more local product. Again, we're trying to support local farmers and industry and stuff as much as we can. So using the Broadbent Farms bacon and the Kenny's and things like that. And when I can get Brussels locally, we try our best.
By the way, all these recipes will be found on the Kentucky Bourbon Festival website. It's all KentuckyBourbonFestival.com, and Chef Stu will supply those and help us out with those. Easy to make stuff.
Definitely easy to make, and this is something you can do ahead. We make a bunch of these every week, and if you have
cases of it every week,
cases and cases of it, we cut and have a lot of Brussels sprouts every week, maybe to the tune of about 150 pounds. Of Brussels sprouts a week. But this is something that you can roast the Brussels sprouts off because they do take a little bit of time. And you can just cool them down in your refrigerator and hold them cold, and then when it's time to eat dinner, you can pull them out and just kind of reheat them in the pan with your bacon, and All right, we're getting just about there. We're gonna go ahead and toss in some of our Brussels sprouts, kind of let them start to get the heat through. And you can really smell that bacon. And those shallots are starting to kind of really come through. So all we really need to do now is kind of get that hot through.
So this is an appetizer here.
It is. It's a shareable.
That's a pretty stout appetizer. Pretty
It
fibrous,
is.
as it were.
It is. It definitely is. But again, it's one of our best sellers. People like it, but it's a good shareable. You can take it out, spoon some out, and share it with your friends.
Yeah, funny. I mean, you've been cooking for a while.
Yeah.
How recent is it that Brussels sprouts went from a side dish to like a featured appetizer? I mean, it's a pretty crazy change.
It has definitely been a change. Growing up, even though I was born and raised here, the only Brussels sprouts I knew were what came out of a box. And the butter sauce and those little square frozen sections. So, when I was a kid, Brussels sprouts probably was not one of my favorite dishes. But as I've gotten older and I was able to actually taste a fresh Brussels sprout, something that's been roasted out, to really taste the sweetness that you can get from them once they're caramelized. Nice. But yeah, I would say maybe a handful of years ago, I started to see things to start popping up. And we've toyed with the idea of tinkering with this dish a little bit, but people seem to love it. So
yeah. Why reinvent the wheel, right?
Absolutely. So our Brussels are, like I said, about heated through. So all I'm going to do is I've taken some maple syrup and bourbon, about a 1-to-1 ratio, and I've just reduced it down to about 50%.
Is that a low proof bourbon, high proof, or
it's our fusion. So it's
nice.
our fusion. So it's about 98 proof or something like that. Again, I probably wouldn't use a really hot bourbon. Just give it a good, nice coating.
So at this point, there's no flame that's going to come from the alcohol in there.
No.
Nobody's
No,
worried
it's
about
already
that.
it's already been cooked off, and especially with being mixed down with the maple syrup and things like that. That alcohol content, that ABV is so low that you're not going to have to worry about.
Sure.
And that's one of the things. It's a good point to bring up. People talk about cooking with bourbon is it can be pretty dangerous around an open flame. It really
Get your attention.
It can definitely get your
sure.
attention in a hurry. I remember the first time I did it at home. I was young and I was trying a recipe. I think it was, I can't remember whose chef recipe it was that I was trying, and it was cooking with the bourbon actually, and I thought I was going to burn down my mom's house. I wasn't quite sure how to put out a big bourbon flame.
And so the trick is pull the pan away from the flame,
Yes.
add the bourbon, then go back. But don't do it over the flame. Unless you're a real badass.
And that's one of those.
You know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really got to try to preach to some of my younger cooks that come through, is because everybody thinks, oh man, it looks amazing and it's so beautiful, and yeah, it's showy, but it can get a little bit crazy.
It'll take the hair off your arms if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Trust us.
So now, like I said, everything's kind of heated through. I'm just going to kind of let it sit in there for a couple minutes so that cheese start to get a little melty. Sometimes, I like to throw it in the salamander, let it melt down a little bit.
Sure.
But
and they can do that in the oven, right?
They can. You can throw it in the oven, or you can just leave it on your pan. You got to watch it sometimes. Make sure the cheese doesn't burn, on the bottom of the pan. But the heat will carry through. So about this point, I'm just going to season it with a little bit of salt and pepper. Because everything's better with a little salt and pepper. One last time. I try to watch the amount of salt that I put on it, because we do get a decent amount of salt from the bacon.
Yeah, sure. Yes. How many cooks would normally be in this kitchen on a busy night?
On a busy night, there'd be about 6.
It's pretty tight.
About 6. You've got to, it can be pretty tight. But you've got to know where your partner is and communicate, because a kitchen can be a very dangerous place. But we've got a good crew. So all we do to plate this dish up is we take one of our cast irons. I'm going to grab a little spatula so I don't burn my fingers.
Got a runaway over there.
Yeah. I got a couple runaways over here. They're like sacrifices to the food gods, so.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I can smell it from over here. It even overpowers the Bardstown cologne.
Yeah.
You see this, guys? Beautiful. Roasted Brussels sprouts, tossed with pan-seared shallots, bacon, tossed with Merple bacon glaze, I almost said. Bourbon maple glaze. Way to go. It's been a long day. We're having fun, though.
The first Napa Valley-style destination on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail to combine distilling, culinary, and beverage experiences, the Bardstown Bourbon Company places the science and art of whiskey making front and center. Our blend of bourbon makers push the boundaries of innovation to produce the highest quality Kentucky bourbon, whiskey, and rye, while honoring the traditional craft of distilling for a modern, authentic bourbon experience. To learn more about our full line of products or schedule a tour, visit bardstownbourbon.com.
Love getting prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh? With the Kroger app, you can get personalized coupons on top of weekly sales and rewards like fuel points, all for prices that are lower than the everyday low. So go ahead, get lower than low. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
So we're back in the Bardstown Bourbon Company Kitchen and Bar Restaurant with Chef Stu Plush, Executive Chef Stu Plush, I'd say. We just finished a roasted Brussels sprout appetizer with shallots and bacon and Kenny's blue Gouda cheese, of all cool, fun, mild blue cheeses. If you don't like blue, give that a shot. Now what do you got up for us?
All right, so we're gonna do our pan-seared salmon dish.
Okay.
So we use Brussel salmon here at the restaurant, which is it's a farm salmon out of Chile, very sustainable. What's really interesting to me, and it's a great note, is if you order their salmon, it actually comes with the QSR code, and you can scan it and track your salmon from when it was hatched until it gets to you.
Oh my gosh!
So you know the life of your salmon. Their ratio of fish to water is really low. It's a really delicious fish.
It's a beautiful
It's sustainable.
Fish, yeah.
So this is a dish that we try to keep seasonal. So right now we're kind of coming in, the tail end of summer here. So what we're going to do is we're going to sear off this beautiful salmon. We have a local corn puree, so that we have working over here. We get in a couple bushels of local corn every week. We shuck it all off, and then I take the cobs. I use an onion, bay leaves, some celery, and then we cook that down to make a corn stock. And then once that stock's done, we take that stock to cook our corn in. And just let it cook until it's tender, and then just puree it out. A little salt and pepper, and leave it alone. Just kind of let the ingredients shine.
It's got to be rich on corn, I would think.
It is definitely, but I like to showcase the ingredients. We bring in a nice corn, a nice local yellow corn, and kind of let the ingredients stand out.
And the whole place here, by the way, is surrounded by corn, so it's apropos. Just out in the middle of a cornfield, distilling whiskey.
Yeah, it is. But what's interesting is all that corn out there might not even last half a day of them cooking whiskey. So
yeah, exactly.
We use a lot of corn.
Exactly.
They told me if I wanted some corn, I was going to have to hurry up and get it. So, so to cook my salmon, I'm just going to get my saute pan nice and hot.
This is something too. I see a lot of people. It's a good point right there. They don't season the fish before they start.
Yeah.
And secondly, they don't get the pan hot enough. I know sometimes at home it can be a little overwhelming in terms of the smoke that comes off it, but that's the way it's done, right?
It is, and that's
good texture.
Yeah, and that's really the only way you're going to get that really good sear. And my favorite part of a salmon is that nice crusty sear that we get on top. So as you can see, we're smoking a little bit. And what I'll do is I'm just going to add a little bit of oil in this pan. Just kind of shake it around. If you're at home and you're cooking it and you see that oil's just starting to smoke and it's starting to shimmer, means we got some nice heat on that. So I'm just going to just sit that salmon right down. You can hear it sizzle and immediately start to caramelize there on the top.
Camera crew all eyeballing the food. These guys are hungry. They've been working all day. Hungry.
Yeah. So while that's going, what we've done to create a glaze is this is a sorghum bourbon glaze. So again, I've used our Fusion Series bourbon,
Right.
And a local Kentucky sorghum. And a similar process to what I did with the maple glaze is about equal parts sorghum to bourbon, maybe a little bit more sorghum, a little bit of red chili flake for a little bit of heat. And all I'm going to do is just kind of finish it on the end. So pour it in, let it reduce down by about half.
In making that glaze, do you heat the bourbon and the sorghum? The sorghum is awfully thick on its own, so does the bourbon do enough of a job of thinning that so it incorporates well?
It really does. You got to watch it. If you're doing it at home, it will foam up on you. So be careful because you can make a
heat
big
it gently.
mess. Yeah, so heat it gently because it can kind of violently foam and boil over the top. And
It's quite a mess.
yeah,
I'm
I've
sure.
cleaned up more than my fair share over the years. So, but yeah, as you can see, the bourbon does a pretty good job, and this has been reduced down.
So where's that redness coming from? Is that from the chili flake or just the sorghum itself?
The sorghum itself, I put just a couple pinches of chili flake in it.
Whoops.
Sorry, little small pan, big burner. And a couple of things that I like to kind of tell my cooks and the home cooks too is, if you're going to put a nice hard sear on something, just leave it. They're constantly checking it and taking it off and seeing if it's ready.
And you kind of look for that white layer to
Yeah.
creep up a little bit on the sides as well.
You can see it. It's starting to just a little bit right there on that side. So, and what I love about this dish too, and especially here at the restaurant, we can put it down. You get a nice hard sear. And some people are worried about overcooking it or burning their salmon. Once you flip it, you can throw it in a hot oven and just kind of let it finish.
Finished job. Yeah, absolutely. Something I like too when I go back to the sorghum, if you've ever wanted a really robust old-fashioned, you can use sorghum as opposed to simple syrup or even like a Demerara syrup done 2-to-1. It's potent. It's going to color the drink a little bit, but it's really grainy, grassy, stuff that doesn't really show up if you're just taking in the syrup. But once you add bourbon, it really brightens that. So try it sometime.
I do. I love sorghum. I grew up eating sorghum. I use it a lot, kind of interchangeably with molasses.
Right.
Some people think molasses has a really strong flavor, and I try to tell people that sorghum to me is almost like a love child between molasses and honey. That's the way I can kind of describe the flavor.
Well
It's not quite as strong as the molasses, but it's a little bit sweeter, a little bit lighter, like a honey. So once I've turned my salmon, you can go ahead at this point. Excuse me,
Can you
Steve.
show that to the camera real quick before it's sacrificed to the oven?
So we just
That's a
got a
perfect
nice
sear.
good sear right on top, nice and brown and crusty. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it in a 400-degree oven, and I'm going to let it cook for probably about 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay, awesome.
All right. So while that's going, I'm going to get our vegetables going. And what we've got with this dish, along with the corn, is a saute of some heirloom carrots and some fava beans.
Okay.
So here at the restaurant, the kitchen and bar, we use fresh fava beans. So my cooks love it. Every Wednesday we come in and get about 2 cases of fava beans.
A lot of cleaning, a lot of labor in that.
It is. It's definitely a labor of love. You've got to shuck the beans, but then they have like a peel on them. So you've got to blanch them for a couple of minutes in hot water, shock them down, and once they cool down, you've got to peel that kind of like waxy peel off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
show us what that looks like. What's the finished result look like?
So the finished result looks like this. It's a broad bean. So we've blanched them and shocked them to help hold that nice green color.
Did they break in half on their own, I guess?
They do, because at the
There'd be
bean.
some tedious knife work to do that.
No, they split half on their own. I can't take credit for that one. They do, and a 25-pound case will yield us about a quart container.
Are you kidding?
So
So a 25-pound case is like that by that, and you're going to get a 1-quart container? That's not only a labor of love, but it's a food cost nightmare, I would think.
it is.
Unless they're cheap.
They're not. But it's, again, in my opinion, it's one of the standout beans. They've got a beautiful flavor, a nice buttery, creamy texture to
Wow.
it. I don't think there's
You
another
sold me.
like it. So we do.
I'll have to buy it at a restaurant instead of doing it at home. It sounds like a lot of work. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chef Stu.
No, you're fine.
Jump in.
So no, it definitely is. It definitely is a labor of love. So again, it might be a piece that is probably going to change maybe with the season. As fava beans go out of season, we'll probably
And all the
transfer
cooks
to
said,
something else.
"Yay."
Yes, they'll probably have a party in the kitchen when it's over with. But you know, you can buy frozen and things like that, but you still just don't get the same flavor. And on the side note, you know, the frozen, you're paying somebody else to do the labor. So
It's true. Somebody's got to do it.
so there's a little bit of a payoff. So again, with this dish, kind of like the corn puree, I kind of just want the ingredients themselves to kind of stand out. So all I'm going to do is, I've got my heirloom carrots. I just slice them on a steep bias, kind of keep them nice and thin.
And they don't look blanched.
They're not. I'm going to
Nope.
cook them from raw.
Cool. Okay.
So we're just going to let those go for a little bit and a little bit of olive oil. Just start to let them caramelize. Toss them with a little salt and pepper, and then kind of at the very end, I'll throw my fava beans in.
So with the different colors, are you getting a very different flavor with this lighter white carrot and the orange that seems standard, and you have a yellow and a purple one? Are they all that different?
There's some subtle differences to the carrots. You know, some of the lighter carrots have a little bit lighter flavor. These that we have now from the current farmer, they're all pretty similar. One thing I will, you know, let the home cooks know if you're dealing with the purple carrots. You know, if you're going to try to use those, if you're going to store them separately from your other carrots, because the color will leach out, or maybe even wear gloves, you end up with purple fingers.
No kidding.
The color out of the carrots, yeah.
So doing that bias cut, a pretty thin cut, you need a really sharp knife.
Yes.
You should. Does it have to be like that? Show me your knife. This is pretty ordinary.
So
It got to
this
be
is
that big?
It doesn't. You know, I like, you know, use a knife that feels comfortable in your hand. You know, this is a pretty classic chef's knife. It's pretty well balanced. If you have a larger hand, you might like a little bit larger knife. Some people with smaller hands like a smaller knife. I also like using like a single-edged vegetable cleaver sometimes when I'm doing really thin slice and press some stuff on my carrots. To me, it just feels good. I've got a nice flat surface, a nice edge to do it. But, you know, the key to a knife is it's just got to be sharp.
That's right.
You know, people ask me all the time, you know, you're a chef, what's your favorite knife? I'm like, well, a sharp one. Because, you know, dull knives can be dangerous. So, yeah, doing these bias cuts and doing any cuts, you know, the key is to have a sharp knife because, you know, dull knife's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the scars to prove it.
All right, I'm going to peek in on our salmon real quick. Looks like we are just
it's
about
beautiful.
there.
I always loved Jacques Pepin when he was on public television, you know, doing his cooking shows. I wish you could smell these, because it really does.
Yes.
To not have smell-o-vision. Somebody's got to perfect that.
All right, those are going. They're getting close. I'm going to go ahead and add some of our fava beans.
These are like gold coins in there.
They are.
All the work that goes into those. That's a colorful presentation.
Just a little salt, a little pepper.
Does anybody on the distillery side of the operation ever come to you and say, we have this whiskey, can you find something to be cooked with it? Is that a challenge they ever give you?
Usually it is. They'll come with a whiskey and the challenge is cook something to eat with it. You know, kind of go back to what you were speaking on to earlier. You know, as we go through and release different whiskeys and come and release our new fusions and discovery lines and things like that, is coming and trying to pair food with it.
Oh, cool.
That's something that we're really doing now. Is a really big focus of the distillery is kind of pairing culinary and the distillery together. So
Absolutely.
when we're tasting new blends and things like that, the culinary is involved. And when we're talking about new menus, you know, our
So
bar
new
manager and
whiskeys
stuff.
altogether you guys are involved in.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So they really are. We do, you know, they're doing a really good job. It's just kind of all of us working
Back
together.
in my day, chefs were just kept in the back, you know, out of sight of most people.
Yeah,
we
they
did
let-
taste wine. We tasted a lot of wine. It's a new day with whiskey.
Yeah, they let me out every once in a while. So
Man, that's fantastic.
all right, go ahead and pull my salmon out. of all that's resting.
Why do you rest? What's the point of that other than just finishing Ellison? I mean, I know there's probably a method to that madness of letting it sit for a little bit.
Well, also, especially when I'm cooking proteins and steaks and things like that, all the juices and everything have a tendency to kind of ball up when they get heated in the middle of your filet or in the middle of your steak. So once they sit there and you let them relax, they can start to release the liquid and the moisture back throughout the protein. So that way, sometimes if you've ever cut into a steak that you pull right off the grill, a lot of times that the liquid and stuff's just going to run out all over your plate.
Oh, cool.
But also,
same thing with fish.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to take this corn puree. I'm just going to put it right in the bottom of our flat bowl. It's got a little thick on me back there, so I apologize.
No judging. Looks awesome. Super bright yellow. It's pretty. Smells great.
All right, so we're going to take our salmon. And we're going to sit that just right on top of our corn puree. Excuse me,
Gosh,
Steve.
that smells good.
I'm going to take a little bit of our sorghum bourbon glaze. And I'm just going to spoon just a little bit right over top. This is a really sweet, strong glaze. So, you could just go ahead and, some people like to glaze it before they put it in the oven if you want it to cook down. I just like to add just a little bit of sauce just kind of at the very end.
And is that room temp at this point, or is it heated a little bit?
Heated just a little bit. Heated just a little bit.
Super healthful, I would imagine, right?
It is. You cooked in just a little bit of oil. Fresh vegetables, corn. You have your starch from your corn. Here's some fresh vegetables. So it is. It's pretty healthy. It's a pretty light dish. And then I just like to finish it with just a little tangle of some pea shoots we get from a local company, Grateful Greens.
Yep, over in southern Indiana, right?
Yeah. Just kind of sit there right on top.
There you have it, people. Pan-seared salmon with a sorghum bourbon glaze, served over fresh corn puree with heirloom carrots and pea shoots. Chef Stu Plush, thanks so much for having me in to watch you cook some excellent stuff with bourbon.
Well, thanks for coming out. I enjoyed having you.
Thanks for being part of the 2020 Kentucky Bourbon Festival, the virtual edition here at Bardstown Bourbon Company's wonderful restaurant, kitchen and bar.